This is episode 63 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by InspectPoint. Today, my guest is Shawn Mahoney. Shawn works for NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. He's in their tech services group. Funny enough, I ran into him. I've always wanted to get him on the podcast, and he throws a lot of great technical knowledge out there on social media and different webinars and learning tools that NFPA has, and recently connected with him, got him on the podcast. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about NFPA 25 changes in the 2023 edition, which was adopted over probably a year and a half ago, but a lot of jurisdictions are starting to move on it. So we kind of went over the top changes from that, which is pretty cool to see. Obviously, InspectPoint has any 2023 changes. We're releasing that here soon. On top of that, we get into NFPA Conference and Expo, which is coming up in June. I think second or third week of June. It's the 16th through the 20th in Orlando, Florida. We'll be there as a fire protection podcast. InspectPoint will be there. Obviously, NFPA and Shawn will be there. It's the best of the best trade show. So hope to see you there at the NFPA Conference and Expo in June. And onto the podcast. Thanks again for liking and supporting. See ya. Thank you, Shawn, for stopping on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We were having lunch. Shawn and I were having lunch a couple weeks ago at the AFAA Fire Alarm Show in Providence, and I think I saw you at the table. I was like, you know what? I probably should go talk to Shawn at some point.
I saw you there, and I was like, I should probably go talk to Drew at some point. And then you just sat next to me, and there we go.
Yeah, and then Chad was next to me. I was in the middle of you and Chad Duffy, so I was, in the nexus of NFPA at that.
Yeah, we're all there.
Well, thanks for coming on. I guess give the listenership who you are. Most people probably know who you are, but give a little rundown.
Yeah, I could do. So my name's Shawn Mahoney. I'm a senior technical services engineer at NFPA. I'm a fire protection engineer. So I work in our technical services group. So just a quick highlight of how we're organized. So in NFPA, we've got our engineering group, and our engineering group has a codes and standards group, and then we have our technical services group. Codes and standards group has the staff liaisons, all the administrators that run our codes and standards process. So like Chad Duffy, he runs the group that they have NFPA 13. He's the staff liaison for NFPA 25. They run the process, they run the technical committees. I'm in tech services, so I'm in a position where I get to work on products that help our membership and our stakeholders apply and use the codes and standards. So I'm in a group where I'm not directly involved in the development of the codes and standards, but I get to help create trainings, write blogs, do podcasts, go present at shows to help our stakeholders understand what the codes and standards are doing, how they can best apply them, and sort of just provide that information and knowledge to our membership.
That's great. So if you're an NFPA member, if they call tech services, are they getting you?
No. So our technical question service actually goes to the staff liaison responsible for that document.
Oh, nice.
So it goes into codes and standards. There are times where we'll take over and answer some questions, or people will send me questions and I can take over that too. But that goes through our codes and standards group, because for the most part, a lot of it is understanding a code requirement. So a lot of the staff liaisons understand some of that a little bit better than we would. So that's why.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Also, just the sheer volume of questions that they get from all of our codes and standards. It's a lot of.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
All over the world.
13, right? They assign one person that each day, that's their thing. 13 questions that come in, they answer them, because we get a good amount of them.
Wow, that's nuts.
Yeah.
That is nuts. Just one person there. So how did you get, I always ask, how did you get into fire protection, and, what got you here?
Yeah. So growing up, my dad was a volunteer firefighter. So I spent a lot of time Friday nights and weekends at the firehouse with all the other kids, as our dads were there. So I kind of grew up around that. And then when I turned 16, I joined my local fire department with my brother. So we were volunteers for a couple of years. And then it was when I got out, graduated high school, I always was very interested in engineering. I did a lot of like home renovations and stuff with my dad. So involved with codes and standards and like requirements. And when I started to be able to like connect the dots and be like, oh, there's a reason why this is a requirement and it's for this, got really interested in that, found out about fire protection engineering through some people at my dad's firehouse growing up that got involved in it. So then I got into it, went to University of New Haven for a semester, and then actually transferred out and went to WPI in Worcester, got my bachelor's in mechanical, master's in fire protection. So that I graduated from there and started working at Tyco Fire Protection Products at the time. Did mechanical, worked in the mechanical group. So did a lot of like groove couplings and all that stuff. Like all that was really interesting. It was like a lot of like the mechanical side of my degree was really fun. And then switched over into the special hazards group there. So did research and development for like water mist systems was my primary focus when I was there. So did a lot of water mist stuff. And then did code consulting for a couple of years, and then I've been at NFPA since 2017. So
yeah, that's fun. It's funny. We were talking the other day, and I started out of a different Polytechnic Institute, Rensselaer, and Polytechnic Institute went right into Tyco Fire Products, or Engineered Products and Services, it was called at the time. Making the dry valve, but I think we kind of crossed paths. Maybe didn't know it because I was working on a lot of water mist systems. While I was at Tyco Fire Products in New York City, and you were just getting into it. So it was funny mentioning that the other day.
Yeah, it was, I think we probably overlapped a couple of months. I think it was that we. So definitely.
Yeah, water mist is if weirdly enough, it's kind of taken off the last couple years and just different applications. It's being potentially used for, because back then it was just like, it was kind of just like tossed to the side a little bit. Like, all right, we have all these other solutions, but now it seems to be coming up a little bit more.
Yeah, it was big. A lot of the work that we did was outside of the U.S. because I think in the U.S. we take for granted, or we're just very used to having a really good municipal water supply. So we never have to think that much about our water supply. But in a lot of older cities, especially like Europe and Spain and like that, they don't have municipal water supply. So they have to store everything on site. So water mist has the advantage of like, you don't need that quantity of water.
Yeah.
They use it a lot over there.
It's funny enough, I went to a fire protection symposium in Bermuda, a small island off the, North Carolina or whatever. They have no water, and most of their water comes from cisterns, right? Rain collection. So there's a lot of water mist there, and there's a lot of, there's really nice buildings there. There's a big insurance industry. So water mist is big there. It was kind of interesting to learn.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the switch now in the U.S. because a lot of the stuff happening with special suppression agents and stuff, where it's just it's been out there for a while. Always been like tried and true solution. So people that being a little bit more beneficial.
No. So I wanted to focus today mainly on, and I'd love to have you on again to talk about NFPA 72, but really NFPA 25. I sit as an alternate on the committee and involved in the meetings and everything there. We're working on 2026. That's coming next, but 2023, it's been out for over a year, or a little, maybe not even.
It comes out the end of 2022, so it's been out for a while.
But no, there's not many jurisdictions that are using it. There's maybe some national insurance AHJs that want to utilize it, but I think Wisconsin is rolling to it. And again, so it's starting to come into effect. And I feel like right when the standard comes out, it's nice to talk about those changes, but until it's adopted, that's when you really need to talk about it, because that's when you have to worry about it, right?
Yeah, there's always this big lag too. Like we're talking about 2023. like we were working on the handbook, like 2 years ago. So I'm like, and not like we're already starting on the 2026. So it's funny that like there's just the lag between the use of the standard that like, yeah, we got to like be on top of that kind of stuff too. So I'm happy
Yeah.
that we're talking about it now that like people are starting to use it. Now they want to know that what the changes are, what the impacts are.
Yeah, and again, kind of compared it, I guess, to 2020. That's kind of the big thing I wanted to hit. It's like, hey, and then we can if you have any you know forward-looking things to 2026 of what's being discussed, we could throw that in there too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a couple of things. First draft report was published last month or so. So there are a couple items that we know have been starting to get talked about. So we can always
Nice.
bring those up when they come up.
So let's I don't think we gave it like a top 10 or whatever, but I know we went through it the other day of kind of some of the big topics. So not in any order, but what are the big things that you've seen for 2023 edition?
Yeah. So one of the ones that I want to bring up, and it's something it's been happening for a while, like the antifreeze um in the codes and standards, like trying to get the changes incorporated into there. And I feel like we've hit the end of the 25 had that sunset period where like moving to the listed antifreeze and like that sunset period is hit, like the requirements are now in there. So just looking at now in 25, the requirements for basically you've got to test the antifreeze. You first have to identify what the antifreeze is in there, right? And determine if it's acceptable or not. Basically, if it's listed or it's not. If you can't determine what it is, or if it's no longer in an acceptable range, you've got to drain the system and refill it with a listed antifreeze. And that's something that now that we have some listed antifreezes on the market, it's something that is possible to happen. So you'll see that change in there now, requiring you to do that annual test and then potentially drain and refill with a listed antifreeze. The interesting thing in there now is it's part of the listing. So UL has the listing for the antifreeze, and the tests in there cover things like toxicity, corrosion, combustibility, electrical conductivity. There's a lot of things that are covered in that. In order to pass some of those requirements, you'll get a like a maximum volume size.
Yes.
So some of them still have that a maximum volume size that can be used to. But now 25 allows you, if you have to put in a listed antifreeze, you can potentially use it outside of that listing, provided you're still looking at things like the freeze point, the compatibility with materials. But the biggest thing there is that like if you have a big system and you got to refill it and there's no listed antifreeze for your size, 25 is allowing you to use that antifreeze for that bigger system outside.
Volume, yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Testing, is that out to a lab or is that the refractometer test or is it both?
So it's all based on the manufacturer's instructions. And a lot of the listed antifreezes now are, I want to say they push away from the refractometer and it's now like hygrometer
Oh, okay.
to do the specific gravity.
So bring it back. You can't do that in the field. You got to bring that back to the
you can do some of it. You can do some. Yeah. I mean, it depends if you bring the test equipment with you, you can do it on site. But yeah, it's all based on the listing of that specific antifreeze. So you have to
Gotcha.
As part of the product listing, the manufacturer's instructions get reviewed by the listing agency. So those instructions are part of it. So you have to follow those when it comes to testing. So it is different. You have to pay attention, like, okay, what is it? What type of antifreeze is it? And then how do I test it? And then what is the acceptable range? And you have to look at the manufacturer stuff. It's no longer like 25 can't tell you it's got to be between this specific gravity, right? Because it's all based on the product.
Is there like a quick guide on this? This would be a nice quick guide. I don't know if you guys have produced anything on like
so because I felt like we were like kind of at the end of all the antifreeze stuff, we did put together a fact sheet that goes over all the antifreeze requirements out of 13, 13R, 13D for new systems and existing systems, as well as I put together some flow charts, which are like, how do you do the test when you make the decision to switch? So all of that, if you want to do that, that's all on our website. It's Antifreeze fact sheet going over all that.
Nice. Yeah, I'll put it in the show. I'll put it in the show notes so anybody listening will link it right to your website.
Yeah, sure. And if you use NFPA link, um, all of the requirements in 13R, 13D, and 25 and 13, the sections that apply, if you go into the enhanced content, that fact sheet will be there, as well as all the applicable information.
Yeah, that enhanced content's awesome. Like I was going through it the other day on something else. It was just like, oh man, just like a click of a button is right there.
Yeah, it's nice. So that as our group tech services, that's one of the main things we provide content for is putting stuff into enhanced content, as well as building stuff in direct, which is our situational navigation. But it's awesome because we used to have our hands tied with handbooks because it had to be printed.
Right.
It had to be printed and you couldn't update it. Right.
All right.
So now we can be a little more creative and we can give more like timely information, and we can always go back and change it. And the media wise, like we're starting to put in more like videos and things that go over requirements, and like
that's cool.
Creating like in cycle, creating information, enhanced content that goes in there. So like the antifreeze stuff, that's all like the 2022 edition of 13 has that. I made that last year. It wouldn't have been able to go in the handbook because the handbook was already printed. So we're constantly updating on
that's
that.
great. Yeah, it's nice. It's real time, and you can add videos to that. And that's we were talking. I was on the Dope and Tape show last night, and they were talking about a pre-action or dry valve, and they're like, man, this 3-minute video, just it's a complicated valve, but after that video, it's like anybody can do it. So
yeah, we're working on starting to put videos. Like right now I'm working on all the valve types. We've created animations on how they all work. Like,
oh, nice.
So we're working on putting that stuff in there. So you start to see a lot of cool enhanced content.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. All right, we got the antifreeze.
Yeah.
What do we got next? Any other big ones?
I mean, there's a couple of big ones. So the next one, it's a small change, but I think it's an interesting one because it's always a question that we get often, and it's about paint loading on sprinklers.
Yeah.
So in Chapter 5, when you inspect a sprinkler, it states that you've got to replace it if there's signs of leaking or corrosion, physical damage, or like loss of fluids and things. And then there's like a sign of paint. And it's always the question of like, okay, well, like if there's a tiny little dot of paint or something that could load the sprinkler that you can't get off, like how much is too much? Or like how much, like a little speck of paint might not actually be detrimental. So now it's added in there that paint applied other than the manufacturer, detrimental to the sprinkler performance.
Yeah.
So it's some could argue it's becoming a little bit more vague because it's not just like a hard set rule, but now it's allowing you the ability as an inspector, or say the owner has a bunch of sprinklers with just a little bit of something on it.
Yeah.
If you look in the annex, it does state you could send out a representative sample and have them tested and see if it actually is detrimental to the performance. And you can make your decision based on that. So it's giving you a little bit of allowance in that.
Interesting. Who does the testing for a spray? Detrimental. That's interesting.
So the biggest you could do, I guess it all depends on like where the paint is located.
Right. It's not an arm. If it's on one of the arms, it's like
then you're looking at RTI and
yeah.
But if it's not, then I mean you could send it back to the manufacturer. They could always look at the
yeah, that's true.
Bucket tests and see if it still passes.
Yeah.
Again, all that. Again, a little bit more. There's still some vagueness in there, but it is giving a little bit more allowance in there. And there's
you know what? I'm sorry to interrupt you. That was one you mentioned to me the other day. One that I didn't see is the sprinkler guard. If the sprinkler guard's damaged, that's new. It's brand new, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
Pull it up.
Yeah, because we just did our 2023 code, and that one popped up, and I was like, oh, we forgot to add sprinkler guards.
Yeah.
Was it new? Oh, I was on Link the other day.
Sprinkler guard.
It was right past the loadings.
Yeah. So that's a new section in there. Sorry, I was just pulling up on Link real quick.
Because guards probably get damaged a lot because if you're in if you're in an area where it's going to get damaged, those
Yeah,
things.
well, I mean, the other thing to pay attention to on guards is, and this is a big thing, the guard has to be listed for use with that sprinkler.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing they're looking at is response time and the spray pattern.
Yeah.
The spray pattern is tested with that guard. You make sure it still passes its test with the guard. If the guard gets moved or bent or damaged, it could be in a way that now the spray pattern is no longer efficient, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it makes complete sense that if the guard was damaged, you don't know how it's going to affect that spray pattern and it should be replaced.
Yeah. Well, are you on the code right now? Does it mention listed?
A damaged sprinkler guard shall be replaced with a guard listed for the sprinkler.
Okay, cool.
And 13 says it too.
I knew 13 said it. Yeah.
I think I think a lot of people might just throw on like whatever guard they have in the truck.
Yeah.
I went through that issue. I had a sprinkler system installed in my house, and I had just some residential pendants in the basement, and I wanted to put a guard on it.
Sure.
I reached out to the manufacturer, and they're like, "We don't have."
They don't have them for residential.
Guard for that one. Yeah.
You should just put it out anyway.
We'll see. I'm waiting to see. I just gotta be extra careful right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to have a fire Anyway, all right. So we got sprinklers. Again, small change, but potentially big change. So
yeah, and then along the same lines for sprinklers is going to be the testing requirements for sprinklers. So in the past, dry sprinklers were required to be pulled out and a representative sample tested every 15 years. That's now been increased to 20 years. Mm-hmm. So you've got to pull a representative sample out and test them. And then after that, you retest them every 10 years.
10. Yep.
So that increase is based on a better understanding on how those sprinklers have been doing since we're reaching that point where we're starting to get the sprinklers tested. So they're looking at how they're doing passing those tests. And then also just like the manufacturing process, the move from the dynamic O-ring, something a little bit more reliable, is now allowing us to increase that test frequency up more. So
yeah, nice. Yeah, and then the fast response changed too, right?
Yep, fast response went from 20 years to 25 years, except for ESFR and CMSA sprinklers. Those stayed at 20 years because those are a little bit more special. We just don't have enough data on how those were doing.
Yeah, there's maybe not, obviously there's a lot more fast response commercial sprinklers out there. So maybe it's just a data set. And I know UL and Dynlabs, has given a lot of that data to the standard, which is really cool because it's changed. That's one part of the standard where you can see that it changed because of the data.
Yeah, it's good. It's good that, we're starting to see that and tweaking it as it goes, which is certainly good to use data to back up a lot of the stuff.
They don't get as many test frequencies because of it, but it's progressing the standard, which is what you want, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. What else we got here?
So the next one that I thought was interesting, and this we can tie into some of the stuff we're seeing for the 2026 edition, is nitrogen systems.
Yep.
So NFPA 13 allows you to increase your C value when you're hydraulically calculating a sprinkler system if you're going to have nitrogen in the pipe. The idea is nitrogen is going to significantly reduce corrosion, so it's going to reduce the friction in the pipe. So you can use a higher C factor, which means you're going to have lower friction loss in the piping, which can allow you to use smaller piping to get that system designed. So sometimes a designer might do that. Now it comes into a maintenance thing where we have something that's required by the design standard. We need to have that nitrogen in the piping in order to design the system. So now 25 now requires, in Chapter 4, it requires that the owner needs to maintain that nitrogen supply for the system, whether it's the generator or you have, physical bottles of nitrogen.
Yeah.
And then in Chapter 13, for both pre-action and dry systems, you need to test semi-annually to make sure that you have at least 98% nitrogen. That's if you're not monitoring it all. If you're monitoring it at some constantly attended location, then you can test it annually.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was still semi. Okay.
Yeah.
But that monitoring, I know there's some digital monitors. I'm assuming that's going back to the fire alarm panel or whatever is supervisory. And is that what you mean by the
Yeah,
monitoring? Yeah.
they use the term constantly attended location in a lot of different standards, like 101 will do it too. The fire alarm is probably the best way, the way that most people are going to do that, because if it's going to be a supervised system,
Yep.
that's going to send the signals to a constantly attended location.
Gotcha.
You could do that a lot. I mean, the way it's written, like, it could be if you have a control room that someone's always there and you've got something that's going to notify you,
Yep.
that could still do that as well.
I'm really curious to see how that goes because I sold and helped and put in a lot of nitrogen systems around the New York metro area, and it was really tough to hold them at 98% nitrogen. And it had nothing to do with the generator or the test. It was more just the piping network. And
Yeah.
you know, obviously, if it's a new system, you don't have as much moisture. But and again, I'm interested to see how that goes now that it's in the standard that you're going to have to be tested. And a lot of times those test points are at the far end of the system. Making sure you get to those and having it accessible when you design it is important too.
Yeah. And the next part too is 25 says you only need to do it if you're using the nitrogen for the increased C value.
Right.
So now you have to track, the designer has to identify, yeah, I'm using this nitrogen system for the increased C value. And that now has to get tracked through the life of the system, that this is a required system that needs to be tested.
Is the placard have, this placard has a C value, right?
I think so. I don't know off the top of my head.
I mean, right there's a reason to change the placard to have C factor, right?
Yeah, but then again, like, how many systems have you been to that
yeah.
I mean, it's required to check in 25, right? You're required to check if it's there. It could be a deficiency if it's not there, but if you lose it, like, getting it back, it's just it's another, like, maintenance item.
Yeah, nightmare on nitrogen. And traditionally nitrogen, it's great for corrosion, right? But maintenance wise, those things are expensive and tough to maintain. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know the vapor barriers are coming out in the next standard, right?
Yeah. So 13, it's like, I have to say proposed still, because we have the tech session coming up at CNE, but it's in 13 right now to allow an increased C factor if you have the vapor guard system.
Cool.
So we're seeing that move into 25 similarly, that you need to if you're using it for the increased C value in 13, you need to ensure that you're maintaining it.
Nice.
So we're seeing that, move forward into
new technology. And I think that one of the other new technologies that I think you're probably gonna bring it up, but it's just the self-test is a water flow alarm, right?
Yeah. So that one isn't. Yeah, we're just seeing a lot of new technology come in. I mean, this is happening in all of our standards, and 72 for fire alarms and 20 for fire pumps. 25 is no different.
Right.
We have a lot of these abilities to do self-testing. So there's a new requirement in chapter 13 about if you've got a water flow alarm device, which is listed to self-test. So there are products out there that what they basically do is they have a way that they can pull the vein back, the water flow vein, and then measure how much time it takes for it to respond back. And it can test to make sure that it's all there and it's still going to respond. You can use that, but then every 3 years, you still need to flow water, right?
Yep.
Like, you can't just keep using that. Yep. And the same thing with water flow. If you've got, now there's the self-test recirculating pumps that you can use, which will recirculate the water equivalent to the lowest K factor sprinkler. You can do that, but then every 3 years, you still have to flow water. So it's just making sure that we're not solely relying on that one thing.
Do you have to be there? Do you have to be in, like, I don't know if it was mentioned, do you have to physically be present when you do that test? What I'm getting at is can that be hooked to a, remote station where that's done automatically?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's going to be into 915 territory.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
I'm not.
Well, no, that won't be that won't be 915. I said on 915. 915 kind of pushes back to 25.
Yeah.
So that's more of a specific for 25. So I'll have to read it again. And
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get a comment in the video or something. Somebody knowing about it.
I can try to pull.
Jason Webb from Potter will definitely be commenting on it.
Oh yeah. Definitely knows. I know. I'm pretty sure there's a section in remotely monitored automated testing in chapter. Oh, that is.
Oh, there is a chapter. You're right, or a subchapter.
Yeah, chapter 8 has it. Let me see. There should be one. Remote.
Because I know they addressed it with fire pump, and if nobody's on site, they got to be there an X amount of minutes for the churn test, stuff like that.
Yeah, it looks like chapter 8 has all of that. I'm trying to see. I'm remembering that there was something this is in chapter 13. I just don't know off the top of my head.
I'd be interested to see if they're starting to be used, because if you're designing a system, you're installing a system, right? You're probably not going to use one of those, and a lot of this goes to installation and maintenance, right? Where you design it for the installation standards, and this goes all fire protection, right? But a lot of times it's not, because you install it, usually that contractor is not doing the maintenance. So they have that 1 year, period that they have to kind of hold that construction of that new construction for, and then it's kind of out of their hands. Yeah. Right. So if they're bidding a project, they've got 10 risers. What makes it benefit them to put in some of the better maintenance stuff? Obviously that should go back to the engineer that's doing this for the building owner and all that, but I have a feeling it's probably not happening as much. And you and I mentioned, like, hey, we got to start designing systems that look at maintenance better, because it raises the cost to the building tremendously sometimes.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of these discussions, and a lot of it seems to just be like a very proactive owner will look at that kind of stuff and be able to track it. Like, because the problem is, and like I've talked to some facility managers about this, the problem is the installation of a new system is whatever capital expense. Like, it's a different bucket than operations.
Yep.
They just want to keep the capital expense as low as possible without comparing it to, like, hey, our operations is going to be lower if we spend more money up front. Yep. So it's a lot of that conversation where it's tough, because and then if you look at the bidding, like, you're just trying to get the most cost-effective system that you can, which doesn't include a lot of some of the extra features that might make a system easier to maintain and test down the road.
Right.
Like, even just simple things as, like, I was talking to a facility manager. He's like, he started in his buildings with his all new projects. Anytime a check valve goes in, you're putting a butterfly valve under and on top. He said, because now you could just close those valves. I mean, they're supervised, like, they're allowed to be there. Close those valves, open up your check valve, do your internal, close it back up, open the valves up. You're good. You didn't have to drain down the system. You've saved so much time from you don't need a fire watch. You don't have an impairment to, like, do that so quickly. So it's just but understanding the cost of that extra to go back and retrofit it is so expensive. To add
totally.
Butterfly valve in design is so small.
Yeah, butterfly valves, a few $100, and then install. It's it's less than $1,000 to put a butterfly valve in. Yeah. Any more changes you saw for the 2023 edition?
Yeah, so there was one. Let's see. You brought up earlier today about the added requirement for inspecting and testing automatic air vents.
Yeah.
This is another one that, what is it, the 19 edition of 13 added the requirement for automatic air vents in sprinkler systems, or some way to remove the air out of the piping network, because we found that at that air to water interface in the sprinkler piping is where you find like that accelerated corrosion. So trying to get all the air out. So then we've added this requirement for automatic air vents. And now we see this requirement come in for inspecting and testing them. And we all know that most, you're required to put it at that high point.
Yeah.
Where is that high point? It's usually very hard to get to spot. Granted, 25 only requires you to inspect it from the floor annually to make sure it's not damaged. But you do have to get up there every 5 years to like pull any strainers or filters out and check it. So
and flush
it. You still gotta get up there every once in a while. So that's a tough one to.
Yeah, I just had on wet systems. It's like, oh man, it's way up in the ceiling. It's like, all right, I'm glad we brought that up, because it is it's going to be a big thing. And again, it's the newer systems going in, but 5-10 years down the road, that's gonna it's interesting to see new technology and how it's going to adapt or kind of evolve over time of how the maintenance goes, because new technology, hasn't been in the field. So how do we know what's going to happen to it too?
Yeah. So as you start changing like those components, definitely the way you do things are going to change a bit. So.
No, this is awesome. This is great, Shawn. Obviously want to do this with 72 as well, because there's some new stuff. We've got the 2022 edition proposed coming out, right?
The 2022 edition's out. The 2026 edition, 2025 edition is up at technical meeting this year, and then will hopefully be released in September, October of this year, along with 13.
Nice. Yeah. So, little plug. We'll do something here in a couple months after, hopefully that's solidified at CNE, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting talking about new technology coming into that, like the cybersecurity requirements in 72. Definitely an interesting one to talk about. Some of that stuff coming up.
And speaking of CNE, what you guys that's exciting. It's what's a month or so from this recording. Yeah, we're gonna have this episode out a few weeks beforehand. But any big highlights at the NFPA Conference and Expo in June?
So big highlights, at least from my point. So I'm responsible for leading the process of selecting our educational sessions and a lot of like the technical content that goes into it. And this year, new for this year, we have 2 learning annexes, which are essentially free educational content. For anyone who comes to CNE, you can get an expo pass for free. If you get on the floor, you can get into these learning annexes. We put 2 together. One's latest information for firefighters, which has got a lot of good sessions.
Oh, that's good.
It's for like a line level firefighter, a mid level management firefighter, like, trying to work their way up, get more involved in codes and standards. This is talking about a lot of the like operational and how you manage the fire grounds on like fire protection systems for firefighters, fire alarm systems, managing battery energy storage systems, managing electrical vehicle incidents. So we've got a lot of those coming. That's going to be Monday, Tuesday, that session. Nice. And then we also have a group of sessions for facility managers and builders, is kind of who we focused it towards, on natural disaster preparedness and recovery. Mm-hmm. So it's going a lot over on like emergency planning. We've got sessions on electrical resiliency and creating an emergency plan, and talking about, every time there's a natural disaster that occurs, like I keep thinking of the one like Hurricane Sandy came through, and there was that one building right in the path that was still there, right? So we have a session from a person going over like the buildings that survived, like what have we learned from all of this? Like what was different about that? Like understanding how you can make a more resilient building. So a lot of that. I'm really interested for that because, this is content. So if you're in the, Orlando area, I highly suggest, coming down for a day and seeing what sessions are available. You don't have to pay for a conference pass if you want to go to those sessions. But then we also have, if you're coming to the conference, we've got over 130 educational sessions Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for anyone who's interested in learning everything and anything around fire protection, life safety, electrical. We've got sessions covering all that stuff.
It's the best. It's the best of the best conference in fire protection and It's
Yeah.
exciting every year when it's a few weeks ahead of time, and everybody's like, oh, when you come to NFPA, and we're in all sectors of fire protection, so everybody usually goes to that globally,
Mhm.
which is really cool. I'm excited personally for it to come back to Boston in what, 2 more years, I think, or is it next year?
No, I think it's still a little while before we come back to
Is
Boston.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, I
We've
always
got
loved Boston.
we'll be in Vegas for 2 years in a row.
Okay.
And then I want to say I think it's Nashville after that.
All right. Nice.
Yeah. So trying some different, and then I think it goes back to San Antonio.
Oh,
Top of
I
my head.
remember. I remember that.
Yeah. So what had happened was because of COVID, we had open contracts with Mandalay Bay.
Okay,
Um, for those few years, we had to use the contracts up.
that
So that's why
makes
we're in
sense.
Vegas here. But Vegas is tends to be our bigger years. Anyways, we have a lot bigger of attendance in Vegas when we have them. So
Yep. I'm just it's local for me for Boston. That's why I was
I it's local for me
and for
too.
you, right? Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, this is great, Shawn. Thanks again for popping on, and
Thanks for having
obviously look forward to see you at NFPA in Orlando, and yeah, let's definitely do something again for 72
me. Sure.
in the coming months. I think that'll be important.
Yeah, I'm also interested, like maybe your listenership, what editions like would you want to hear changes for? Because
Oh, that's
we
great.
can easily talk about the 2025 edition. Like we talk about some of those changes, but like if they want to hear about the 2019 or 2022,
Yeah.
interested to hear like what editions they're on, and we can kind of focus on that.
That's a great point. I may pull that within Inspect Point. That's actually a great poll. And maybe we just focus the next one on that, right? Because nobody's gonna be on 2025 anytime soon. So,
Yeah, I mean it's good to know like we can talk
yeah,
high level on some of the big changes.
right.
If they're using more of like the earlier stuff, I'm happy to talk about those too.
Hey, recurring guest, Shawn Mahoney.
I'm happy to come on and talk. I mean, talking changes is fun, and I just like being able to help everybody understand, how to use the COSA standards and where everything's going. So
That's great. That's great. Well, where can everybody find you? Obviously NFPA.org for anything NFPA, but
yeah, so if you want to learn more about Conference and Expo, nfpa.org/conference to learn everything about Conference and Expo. You can find me on LinkedIn, or yeah, it's probably the easiest way to get a hold of
yeah,
me. Find me on LinkedIn if you got questions about stuff.
yeah, I'll throw you in. I'll tag you in this. So
Yeah, so that's the best
great.
way. But,
Yeah. Thanks again, Shawn.
yeah, thanks for having me, Drew.
See ya. This has been episode 63 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by Inspect Point. I want to thank Shawn Mahoney again for coming on the podcast, discussing new changes within NFPA 25, and more to come, right? Where we potentially have some more podcasts here talking about some of the changes in the code. So, potential reoccurring guests. So, again, thanks to Shawn, and hope to see you at NFPA here in June. Take care.